Welcome everybody to Go Local Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. A little quick updates on the day. Earlier today we had Zach Levesque from North Point talking about where the financial markets are, the mortgage industry, and the real estate market. Take a look at that on Go Local Live. Secondly, Dr. Fine was on at noontime giving an update as to where he sees the hot spot. Obviously, the numbers coming out of Central Falls and Pawtucket are of concerns as well. Governor Raimondo just finished her press conference. She has said she is not following, as of yet, Governor Baker, who announced today that Massachusetts schools would be closed for the rest of the year. So stay tuned on that, and some significant number of new cases. I believe it's the largest number of new cases yet to date. Let's go down to Aquidneck Island. Terance Roehrig, professor at the Naval War College and a top expert on the Korean Peninsula. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure, Josh. Always fun to be here.
Terry, lots of news overnight that Kim Jong-un was gravely ill, according to, I think CNN was the first Western media to break this story, that he was gravely ill, functionally on his deathbed, and that had massive implications not only for Asia, but as well as the rest of the world. What's your take on that report, and what does it mean?
Well, I think it is premature to put too much stock in that report. There are wide-ranging reports from various sources that indicate, again, I think the worst was CNN last night, that talked about Kim Jong-un having heart surgery and being in grave danger, to others that said he may have had surgery or some medical procedure, but is doing fine and resting, to others saying there was nothing that happened. And this is largely a rumor that this has happened before, where we have had major rumors about North Korean leadership, and it has proven to either be exaggerated or to not have happened at all. And so I think we need to wait to see over the next couple of days what the reports are, confirming or denying these various pieces.
South Korea came out a little while ago and said that the reports are certainly not as extreme. His situation is not as extreme, and to their knowledge, he was not gravely ill, which was what the report was. Is South Korea a good resource for understanding what's going on in North Korea, or do they have their own inherent spin as well?
No, I think the South Koreans are absolutely one of the best sources to be able to determine this. And there are also a couple of news outlets that are in South Korea that provide very good information on this. One of them is NK News. And they have been reporting as well that be cautious about some of these estimates. As you note, the South Korean government said everything looks as usual in North Korea, and we don't see any signs of anything. NK News and some other outlets have confirmed some of those things. So again, I think it remains to be seen. North Korea has denied that there is anything. Now, no surprise there, and they gave a public statement that this on Tuesday morning that Kim had offered his congratulations to the Cuban government. China has said that there's no basis for the rumors about Kim Jong-un's illness. Of course, those two sources you have to take with a bit more of a grain of salt. But again, I think it's just too early to know for sure what the impact, what the actual events have been.
Kim Jong-un is not a very old man, 36-ish?
Yes.
But does have questionable health, heart issues and diabetes, correct?
Yes. So, he is not the paragon of good health, as he is overweight. He is believed to possibly have diabetes. He's a smoker. His family has a history of heart disease. So a rumor around his health is certainly not implausible. But nonetheless, we have to be careful about jumping to conclusions based on those issues.
If something were to happen to him, not in this instance, but in a future instance, who takes over for him? Is there a secession plan in North Korea?
Well, and that's the big question because, much of this could be watched from afar as a sort of interesting foreign policy issue, domestic issue, but it is the succession issue and the future of North Korea that is riding potentially on this, that makes this a really important issue and an important question. The short answer is there is no succession plan that we can tell. That is not that atypical in authoritarian regimes because they tend to not have those kinds of arrangements too far ahead of time. What might be some possibilities? Certainly in North Korea, it is absolutely crucial to be a member of the Kim family. There is an ideology crafted around the lineage of the Kim family. And so there are only three leaders, have been grandfather, father, and now grandson of the Kim family. And so when you consider that, who's left? Well, you may recall that in 2017, Kim's older half-brother, Kim Jong-un, was killed in a essentially assassination attempt in the Kuala Lumpur airport.
Right.
Kim Jong-un has a brother who is just a shade older than him that is still alive and he is a full brother who is in North Korea. He has a government position. He could very easily be nominated and put in place to be the next Kim successor. Kim does not have any sons himself to pass this on. He has a couple of daughters, we believe, but they are relatively young age. I'm going to say somewhere around 5 or 6 years old. Kim also has a sister who is believed to be a very trusted confidant of Kim Jong-un, but inheriting power for a woman is a big question mark in North Korea. So I think there are some really serious issues here, and the succession plan not clear. And of course, what is the huge concern is if there is chaos in the resulting events, then a lot of things are really up for grabs. But I would add one other point to this, that even if there is an uncertain succession path through the Kim family, there is also another possibility, and that is that the senior leaders in the party or the military might form some sort of rule by committee, because they would have an awful lot to lose if North Korea descended into chaos and civil war. And so I think you could also see some sort of rule similar to what you saw in the old Myanmar or Burma, where you had a military party organization that ruled. One of the things that I think you always have to be thinking of is you may be happy to see Kim Jong-un go as a very nasty dictator, but what could follow isn't necessarily going to be better, and it could certainly be worse on a number of different fronts.
This was one of the headlines this morning. In a normal state, outside of the purview of the economic and health crisis of the coronavirus, this would be probably the number one story in the world. Let's look at North Korea as a threat, as a destabilizing threat, both to the United States, but also to world stabilization. How potentially disruptive is North Korea as it is governed today?
Well, and that is another important question, that certainly the tensions on the Korean Peninsula have been serious and have been a concern. North Korea now is a nuclear weapons state. We have continued a process to try to get North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons through summit diplomacy that President Trump has met with Kim on a couple of occasions. But that process has been stalled, and it's not clear if and when that will be restarted. But that is one of the key questions for security. What will be the implications for the likely continuation of a nuclear North Korea in East Asia? My own view on this is I think it's very unlikely North Korea is going to be willing to give up its nuclear weapons. I think we are going to have to learn to live with a nuclear North Korea. I certainly don't relish that fact. But on the other hand, I think that it's not necessarily the disaster and the road to war and conflict in East Asia that sometimes folks believe it is. I think North Korea has been deterred at a strategic level. They can continue to be deterred even with a nuclear weapons capability and ballistic missiles, but it is certainly going to be a different sort of security environment in Asia. But again, while I'm not happy about that, I think it can be managed over the years.
Do you think President Trump's efforts, although not fully successful, have helped because they've created a dialogue between the two world leaders? Or has it been a wash and we're no different than we were prior to this administration?
Well, it's complicated. I think in a number of respects, dialogue is always a good thing. And when you think back to where we were in 2017, and there were serious conversations about war erupting on the Korean Peninsula, dialing back those tension levels, the direct talks, I think, were a positive thing to happen. But with that said, there are a number of reasons to sort of question how this was done, as well as overall alliance relations that were part of this. I think certainly it was worth the effort to have the dialogue. Some would argue that what you typically have happen in these kinds of contexts is before you bring the big leaders together, you have discussions at lower levels to iron out a plan, a document, if you will, to be able to sort of settle some of these issues, move the process towards denuclearization. That didn't happen, but I think, again, it was important to perhaps have the leader-to-leader dialogue to start that process. But I think myself and many others were skeptical from the start that this was going to necessarily lead to an outcome of North Korea giving up its nuclear weapons. I suppose I'm more concerned with some of how this was handled between the U.S. and the South Korean officials, that there were some elements of this that I think could have been handled better, and alliance relations could have been done in a much more positive manner. But I think bottom line here, we have some difficult issues going forward, not only with North Korea, but currently in regards to the South Korean administration and the U.S. perhaps being on some different, having some different views on how North Korean relations should be handled. So it's going to be some interesting years ahead as we try to manage this very challenging security and foreign policy problem.
We've had U.S. troops in South Korea, on the Korean Peninsula, for almost 70 years now, I guess 70 years since the beginning of the conflict. Do you foresee any change in that status? It is a massive military buildup. It's tremendous cost to the U.S. taxpayer. Does that change in any way?
That is one of the issues that I think needs to be revisited, or at least in my view, I think we have not handled this very well. South Korea is a valued ally, and while the security arrangement and the security circumstances on the Korean Peninsula have changed somewhat, this is not just about the United States having troops there for solely financial gain. This is about the United States having important interests in the region, having a presence, having an important ally there. And I am concerned with how we are going about some of the bargaining that happens in regards to the burden sharing talks that I think you're alluding to in your question. We often look at this and think of how this cost is for the United States. But imagine if the United States is no longer getting cost sharing from South Korea, and the current estimate is that it's about 50%, maybe a shade under. The South Koreans have offered to increase that amount to 13%. But that is apparently not going to be a number that's going to be accepted. But if you argue that the alternative is to pull U.S. forces and take them out, Unless you decommission those units, now we are on the hook for that entire amount.
Right.
This way, with the alliance, with U.S. troops there and having support from the South Korean government, they are paying for almost half. And that's an important consideration. This is not simply a cost-saving measure. It is much more complex than that. And again, is important for the United States and its broader security interests. Now, certainly, there is an argument to be made about money. That's always a reasonable point of discussion between allies. There also is an important discussion to be made about how many troops are there, what are the capabilities that they should have. But it should be done in a manner where both sides see that they have gain in this relationship and that this alliance is important. Not only for South Korea, the Japanese are also watching very closely in how the U.S.-South Korean alliance relationship plays out, because those two relationships, though not formally, are linked in a number of different ways.
Terry, what else should people know before we break? What should they look for in the next couple of weeks?
Well, I think it is simply to watch to see what the reports are in regards to Kim Jong-un's health, and to see confirmation based on some of these different reports, what's true, what's not. Take a deep breath, hang in there, and be patient to see what these reports are going to say, and then go forward. I don't think it's necessarily the disaster that many people are painting. We have been through this before in regards to rumors. Let's wait and see. This is not going to be perhaps the disaster that some people have been suggesting.
Professor, thank you so much. Please stay safe and healthy. For everybody else, we'll be back at 3 o'clock with UVA, University of Virginia professor Jennifer Lawless, talking about the White House, their handling of the coronavirus, as well as Joe Biden's campaign now that he's engaged a number of high-level endorsements. Stay tuned for that at 3 o'clock. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Please stay safe.